I walked into the church alone that evening, my hands clutching a small purse like a shield. The grand hall smelled of polished wood and fresh lilies, the sound of the gospel choir carrying through the rafters like a memory. Everyone was dressed to the nines, heads turning as I passed. I had chosen my best navy dress, simple but pressed, my hair pinned back like I used to for hospital shifts. It was my son's wedding, but I felt like a stranger in my own family. I caught the usher's hesitation when I reached the front row, his eyes darting to someone behind me, his hands unsure where to seat me. Whispered voices rippled through the pews. I kept my head high, though my chest felt tight. This was supposed to be a day of pride. Instead, the cold glances from Kiana and the stiff back of my son told me what I already knew. I remembered nights sewing his uniforms, the bills I paid on time, the funerals I faced alone. And still, here I was, unwelcome at his altar. The ceremony went on like a script someone else had written. The choir's voices dimmed as the vows were read. I rose slowly from my seat, just to move closer, just to be near enough to hear his voice clearly one last time. But before I could even step into the aisle, Braxton spun around. His face wasn't the boy I raised. It was hard, cold, rehearsed. "My wife doesn't want you here," he shouted. The words cracked through the sanctuary like a slap. The choir stopped mid-note. Guests gasped and shifted. I stood frozen, my palms damp, trying to keep my spine straight. He stared at me like a stranger. Kiana's eyes never met mine. This wasn't a slip of anger. This had been planned. Inside my head, a flood of his childhood moments tumbled through, scraped knees, late-night fevers, birthday candles. How did we get here? I thought, but my lips stayed sealed. I moved forward slowly, steadying myself as the pastor tried to regain order. My voice came out calm, low, but it carried. If I'm not welcome as the woman who gave this man life, then this celebration means nothing. I took the microphone from his hands, holding it like I used to hold Braxton's little head, gentle but firm. This wedding is over. The air cracked. A murmur rose, like the beginning of a storm. Braxton's jaw locked. Kiana's hand clenched the bouquet. People shifted uncomfortably. A cousin hissed something under her breath. Years of being silent pressed against my ribs, but this time I wasn't swallowing it down. I handed the mic back, turned, and walked toward the doors. The hush followed me, but so did the whispers. Some guests stood. Others argued quietly. Kiana's face was red. Braxton stood frozen. I kept moving. My steps echoed off the marble floor, the same rhythm as nights I walked hospital halls alone. Outside, the air hit my face cool and damp. Strength on the outside, storm inside. A young girl, I think a niece I'd barely met, hurried after me. She touched my arm, whispered, "I would have done the same." I looked at her, but I couldn't speak. She turned back. I walked to my car parked under the oaks, slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel until my fingers hurt. "This wasn't just about today," I whispered, staring at my trembling hands. "It's been building for years." They always said I was too quiet. Maybe that's why they thought I wouldn't walk away. Morning light slid through my curtains, pale and tentative, like hope creeping back after a long night. The house felt hollow, silence heavy in the halls. My phone lay face down on the kitchen counter, unplugged, an act of defense. I didn't dare face messages or voicemails yet. I moved slowly, pouring coffee, listening to the drip of grounds, the hum of the refrigerator. I glanced at the wedding invitation on the fridge door. The edges curled, names printed boldly, Kiana's name now dominant. Inside me, a quiet ache grew. This was my son's wedding. Yet I was already erased. I went to the living room and sat in the armchair where Braxton as a child once curled beside me. The memories lifted. Bedtime stories, quiet kisses, arguing with his father years ago. The pain of those days felt distant, softened, but now I felt it sharp and raw again. You always expect the world to break you. You just don't expect your child to lead the charge. I mouthed those words to myself, tasting bitterness. The door swung open. Aunt Vi walked in, carrying a foil-topped dish and a fierce look. She didn't knock. She never did. She set the dish down, pulled out 2 chairs, sat across from me without ceremony. She spoke. I would have burned that church down myself if I'd known they'd treat you so. The strength in her voice contained 1,000 years of shared hurt. She asked me the questions I wouldn't ask myself. Did I protect Braxton too much? Was I too quiet? She remembered when our mother's voice could silence a room. Vi had learned boundaries early. Respect don't come from birthing, she said. It comes from boundaries. I felt a tremor in my chest. She pressed. About Kiana's attitude, about changes in Braxton over the years. Later, I fumbled with the phone. I never check voicemails, but something made me open the app. My finger slipped. An old message from 2 weeks ago played. Braxton's voice, cold laughter. I don't care what she thinks, Kai. She's lucky we even invited her. Then Kiana's voice. We'll seat her in the back. That'll send the message. My heart jerked. I dropped the phone. My hands shook. Betrayal tasted sharper than I remembered. I sat in stunned silence, stunned by a cruelty I'd refused to see. I reached for the delete icon, but paused, then undid. I kept it. I had to keep it. No more self-erasing. I caught my reflection in the mirror later. I saw a woman, older, strong, but wounded. I revisited the verses I'd memorized in church. Honor thy father and thy mother. I scoffed. What kind of honor allowed this? I realized silence had turned into complicity. A question formed. Did patience protect me or bury me? I walked forward, pen in hand, opening a small journal. Truths I swallowed. I scribbled. I ain't swallowing nothing no more. Let them choke on it instead. I placed the notebook next to my coffee mug and let my gaze settle on the first blank page. I wrote, The day my son called me unwanted. The words felt heavy, righteous. I thought of what Kiana and Braxton had done, and what I would now do. And yet the worst wasn't what he said. It's what I remembered next. The sky wore a heavy gray today, like it understood the weight I carried. I sat on the old porch with my journal in my lap, its cover cracked and familiar. I ran fingers along the edges as thunder rumbled distantly, a low warning that matched the restlessness within me. Around me, life continued. A neighbor across the street waved while dragging grocery bags, children's laughter drifting from some yard. She saw me as the woman who waves back. They didn't know I felt erased. I lifted my pen but paused, breath caught, then scrawled, Pain doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits with you and sips tea. The words came out soft, almost a whisper, and yet they landed with weight. Once storms calmed me, they felt like cleansing. Now they seemed mirrored, quiet, dangerous, ready to break. Later, Reverend Collins showed. He came in quietly, saddled with concern rather than judgment. He didn't need an invitation. His presence carries years of trust. He settled into a chair across from me and said, You know, sometimes the ones we raise turn into storms we didn't see coming. His eyes searched mine. He spoke of Raymond, how long ago my late husband had confided to him worries about Braxton's temper. My chest tightened. I tried to brush it off. That was a long time ago. But his words pierced. He placed a gentle hand on mine and said, Memories don't come back to hurt you. They come back to teach you. He left as quietly as he arrived, and I sat in his absence, hollow and haunted by what I had refused to feel. That night, I cued a jazz record Raymond and I used to dance to in our small kitchen. The needle hit the groove, and melancholy notes filled the room. As the music played, a memory broke loose. I saw Braxton, 13 years old, standing on our front steps, mocking a girl who stuttered in church. I stood in the kitchen, watching. Raymond had stepped in, his face stern, pulled me aside later. He whispered, That boy's heart ain't right in places. We need to watch that. I had defended Braxton instantly. He's just a child. He'll grow out of it. But in that moment, I realized I had closed my eyes willingly. I listened to the song and let the memory replay, not hiding, not denying. The past folded into present, the tears came, but I didn't stop the record. Sitting in that dark room, I confronted what I had long denied. Love had become a veil. I believed covering his faults was caring. But now I saw how that veil blinded me. The worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves because we can't bear to lose what we love. I muttered into silence. I opened my journal again and wrote, I saw the signs. I just kept drawing blinds over them. Every word carved itself into me. Outside, the rain began in earnest, tapping windows, a steady drum against the quiet inside. I rose and retrieved an old photograph of Raymond, face down all these years. Tonight, I placed it upright on the nightstand. I whispered, I hear you now. Stillness held me in its grasp. And then the doorbell rang, sharp in that quiet, carrying a truth I was nowhere near ready to face. Morning sun filtered through my curtains like it didn't know what happened yesterday. I sat at the edge of my bed a long time, staring at the same pair of church shoes I'd worn for years. I put them on slow, like each buckle was a decision I had to make again. Hat, gloves, dress. I dressed like the woman they expected me to be, quiet, polished, unshaken, even when I felt everything cracking underneath. Walking into the church felt like stepping onto a stage where the script had been rewritten overnight. Folks smiled, nodded politely, but the air shifted when I passed. Their conversations dried up like a creek in July. One deacon, the same man who prayed over Braxton at his baptism, couldn't even look me in the eye. That told me all I needed to know. Something had shifted, and they were in on it. All of them. I didn't cause a scene, didn't raise my voice or demand answers. I just eased into a back pew and folded my hands in my lap. My grandmother used to say, sometimes silence says more than thunder. That morning, I was a storm waiting. On the table near the entrance was the program, gold lettering on cream paper, fancy and formal. I picked it up out of habit. My eye caught the section, honoring the families behind the union. I scanned it like my life depended on it. Then I froze. Mother of the groom, Geraldine Carter. My stomach dropped. My name wasn't listed. Not under mother, not in acknowledgements, nothing. I had planned the wedding, paid for the flowers, bought Kiana's dress with my own hands, and they erased me. On paper, on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. I folded the program so tight it crinkled like dry leaves. No tears came. Just a stillness that scared me more than any anger. I sat there holding that paper like it was a weapon they used on me, and I was still bleeding inside. Service began. Choir singing soft. Geraldine strutted to the front in her bright yellow suit, smile wide like she'd won a prize. Pastor Collins called her up and said, Let's thank Sister Geraldine Carter for raising Braxton into the man he is. The congregation clapped. My ears rang. I'd sat in that same pew 20 years ago when Braxton recited his first Easter speech. Back then, folks clapped for me. This time, even the pastor couldn't meet my eyes. His gaze slid past me like I wasn't even sitting there. And the choir, Lord, they had the nerve to sing Blessed Assurance. Blessed for who? Assured of what? It felt like a slap. A holy one, but a slap all the same. I didn't speak, didn't stand, but inside me something shifted, something clear. When lies become communal, truth becomes a threat. That thought sat in my chest like a stone. That wasn't a mistake. That was a rewriting. I remembered what my grandmother used to say. People don't just lie to hurt you. They lie to reshape how the world sees you. That morning, I saw exactly what was happening. Kiana's folks, her mother especially, were painting a whole new picture, and Braxton was letting them. It wasn't just family politics. It was gaslighting, reputation theft, right there in church, under the Lord's roof. And they expected me to sit still, smile, nod, and thank them for letting me breathe the air I paid to freshen. They want me to play nice, sit quiet, and look grateful for crumbs from the table I built. That thought held me still like an anchor, but I knew this much. I wasn't about to let them put that mask on me and forget who I was underneath. No, ma'am. When the last amen was spoken, I slipped out through the side door. Nobody saw me leave. Nobody asked why I didn't say goodbye. In the garden behind the church, near that old statue of a weeping angel, I knelt and laid the folded program down like a headstone. I stared at that angel, and I whispered, "They picked a mask for me today. Docile, forgettable, erased. But I still know who I am." The breeze shifted. Sunlight hit the back of my neck. I stood up, dusted my skirt, and walked home steady. That evening, I was folding clothes and humming low when the phone rang. I answered, voice steady. On the other end, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time said 5 words that made my whole body go still. "We need to talk, now." By the time I pulled into Dion's driveway, the sky was already swallowed by night. Her porch light flickered once, then glowed steady, like it knew I was coming. I didn't knock. I never do. Some friendships just open the door. She was already in the kitchen, 2 glasses out, wine bottles sweating on the counter. "You looked like Sunday in morning today," she said, not even turning as she poured. I sat down at her old kitchen table, the one with the deep scratch Braxton made as a child. It smelled of burnt coffee, varnish, and thyme. I exhaled hard, stared at the glass in my hand. "They clapped for her," I said. "Geraldine, at the church." Dion didn't blink, just slid the wine across. "They forgot who paid for that building." "They didn't forget," I said. "They just picked a side." She nodded. "Are you ready to stop protecting people who wouldn't flinch to cut you loose?" I went quiet, the kind of quiet that holds shame. "I've been proud," I said. "Too proud to admit my son's flaws, too scared of what it says about me if he's—" "A monster?" Dion offered. I winced. She leaned closer. "Azaleen, there's more you don't know." I looked up. She never used that voice unless something was about to hurt. She told me Kiana had come to her, months before the wedding. "She said Braxton manipulates her," Dion said, calm but firm. "Emotionally, quietly, always leaves her doubting herself." I blinked fast. "She didn't come to you," Dion continued, "because she thought you'd choose him over her." My heart thudded, and suddenly, I was back in my own kitchen. Kiana sitting across from me, playing with her bracelet, eyes darting. "Does Braxton always get like this when things don't go his way?" she'd asked. I'd laughed. "Oh, honey, wedding nerves. He's just trying to get it all perfect." That was all. She smiled weakly and dropped it. "I thought she was being dramatic," I said now. "I thought she was spoiled." I didn't realize she was signaling for help. Silence again. My mind started racing backward, connecting things I never questioned. I remembered a night Braxton came in angry, blaming me for a bill he forgot to pay. "You raised me to be disorganized," he said. "You never taught me how to manage anything." And God help me, I apologized. "I called it stress," I muttered, "but that was gaslighting." "You can't fix what you won't face," Dion said. I sat there, heart thudding, shame pooling deep in my gut. "Some of us wear denial like a silk scarf," I whispered. Soft, elegant, and choking us slowly. Dion put a hand on mine, firm, warm. "It's not too late," she said. I nodded. "I let this house rot from the inside. Didn't see the mold under the paint. Now it's in the walls. So tear it down," she said. "Or at least air it out." I pulled a piece of paper from my purse, started writing. Not an apology, not an accusation, just the truth. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's record correction." She smiled. "You got one of the sharpest tongues I've ever met. Use it with grace." I finished the letter and folded it slowly. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in a while, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I stood to leave, gathered my purse, slipped the folded letter inside. Then there was a knock at the door. Dion looked at me. I looked back. She opened it. Kiana. Her eyes were red, her hand tight around a small envelope. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, "but you need to see this." She pressed the envelope into my hand, fingers lingering. Inside that envelope was the final straw, proof that silence wasn't just a choice, it was a mistake. The lamp flickered overhead. Rain pattered against the windows like soft fingers tapping a warning. The wind outside rattled the edges of the house. My den felt too quiet. I sat at my desk, the envelope from Kiana still there, untouched. The key in my pocket fit the lock snugly. I exhaled, opened the drawer. Inside was a folder I'd believed lost. The air smelled of old paper and bitter coffee, stale but potent. I paused, hand hovering. Once I opened this folder, there'd be no turning back. I unclasped the folder and pulled out the first page. My name sprawled across legal documents, venue contracts, invoices, payments to the band. Every item bore my signature. In the margins, paid by A. Monroe, mother of groom. My heart sank. Kiana's family had walked publicly as sponsors, praised in speeches and programs. But here was the proof. They had been financially invisible while I carried the burden. I swallowed. I would use this ledger. Deeper in the folder was a framed photograph. Zaire, a toddler, sat in my lap at a family gathering, her eyes bright, her small hand curled around my necklace. But in the copy tucked behind it, the same image stood labeled, guest's niece. My chest tightened. They had erased my maternal claim. My role as grandmother reduced to fiction. A cold betrayal cut through me. I laid the ledger open across the desk, spread the documents, placed the photo at its center. I didn't call anyone. I opened my scanner and began to copy every page, every signature. I formed a plan. Submit to the local paper, send files to the church elders, archive backups where they couldn't erase them. Then I picked up fresh paper and began writing a letter to Braxton. You built a life I supplied, but erased me from view. I folded it, placed it atop the ledger. Strategy over spectacle. The lamp flickered again. I moved to turn it off. A car door slammed outside. I froze. Sliding the curtain aside, I saw Kiana's silhouette in my driveway, rain bouncing off her car. I whispered, "Why are you here?" Then footsteps behind me. I spun. My eyes met the empty space where the folder had stood. The ledger was gone. I pulled into my driveway just after dusk. Rain dripped off the eaves and pooled at my feet. The porch light was off, the door ajar. I stopped cold. Something in me knew before I entered. Inside, papers littered the floor. Drawers yanked open. My safe's door swung wide. Half my files gone. The ledger folder sat on the desk, but only half full. Invoices missing, recordings and contracts gone. I froze, listening for a footstep, a whisper, anything. The violation cut deep. They invaded my home because they feared my voice. They dared me to speak, to expose them. I left before dawn. I drove straight to the wedding site. Morning light was weak, the sky gray and heavy. Entering the building felt cold. Guests milling, small talk rising around me. I stayed near the edges, and then I saw it. A display case with the handcrafted locket I'd given Braxton years ago. A plaque under it read, "From the bride's mother." People paused, pointing, murmuring. A gift I gave him, now repackaged as someone's virtue. My chest tightened. Someone had weaponized my love. I found Kiana near a side corridor. She turned when she heard me. "That locket," I said, motioning toward it. Her eyes flickered. She tried to smile. "It's decor, Azaleen," she said. "No, nobody meant to." "Don't lie to me," I said. "I know when things are stolen." I reached into my coat, a stack of scans, photographs, fragments of the evidence they couldn't take, documents with names, dates, checks. I laid them in her line of sight. She paused, her lips pressed thin. Behind her, Braxton stepped forward, face taut. "You're playing a dangerous game," I said. "Return what you stole, or make them all see who paid for this day." She stuttered, eyes darting. She didn't confess. Braxton didn't speak. I backed away. That night, I called Dion. We drove to Miss Buntwater's house. The elder opened the door, welcomed us inside with quiet strength. I showed her what remained, a piece of ledger, a photo, the proof. Miss Waters turned them carefully, brows creased. She nodded. "They took your voice," she said. "We'll help you reclaim it." She promised to stand publicly at church, to push back, to bring others to her side if needed. Close to midnight, I moved through the church grounds. The stone walk was slick, leaves wet. Under a bench, I spotted the missing folder, half hidden, corners bent. I crouched to take it. My fingers grazed the cover. A whisper from the shadows. You should have stayed silent. I swung my head around. In the doorway, Kiana's silhouette stood framed by the dim light. The church sat silent when I slipped through its doors. Shadows pooled in the corners. My footsteps echoed on cold tile, the hush of an empty sanctuary pressing in. I carried the ledger folder to the altar, placed it down gently. I stepped back and listened, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Hymn fragments drifted from past services, a memory wound tight around my ribs. I sensed someone behind me, but didn't turn. This place once held my faith. Tonight, it carries my reckoning. The doors burst open. Braxton stormed in, anger twisting his features, Kiana and Geraldine close behind. He roared, "You don't belong here! You never did!" The words reverberated, cutting through the quiet. Candlelight glinted off dust motes drifting in the air. I stood firm. He continued, voice harsher. "Stop acting like this is your moment. This is ours." The accusation landed, but I stayed steady. Kiana advanced, trying to whip the crowd against me. She spoke quickly. "She's making a show, disrupting everything." Then the speakers crackled. Her voice echoed, not her speech, but a confession. "We'll seat her in the back. He'll follow. Erase her name." The crowd gasped. Geraldine's knees shook. Braxton stared at Kiana in shock. My chest lifted. Vindication had arrived. From a side door, Miss Waters stepped forward. Her voice rang. "Let the truth be heard." She held up scripture and ledger pages side by side. The pages glimmered under soft lighting, their weight undeniable. Braxton opened his mouth, but no words came. I advanced, voice clear. "You built this night off my sacrifice. Now you'll see who stood in the shadows and still held the light." Kiana's face crumpled. Geraldine's eyes widened. I turned and walked off the altar, leaving the ledger and the projector showing Kiana's own hidden plotting. The congregation murmured. Cameras flashed. Braxton moved to follow me, but the heavy doors slammed shut behind me. Outside, under the streetlights and rain, I watched them through tinted glass. Their faces trembled. I sat at my sewing machine in the quiet evening, the thread pulling through torn fabric. I was repairing a church scarf I'd worn many Sundays, mending fray and tear like I was trying to mend what had been broken between Braxton and me. The room smelled faintly of stitched cotton and old wood. Reputation is a fragile thing in this town. One moment you're honored, the next moment whispered about. I breathed, thinking of my grandmother's words. "You live long enough, child, and you'll see your enemies trip over the stones they threw at you." At that moment, the post dropped through the slot. Among the usual flyers and bills was a single envelope, familiar in how it trembled in my hand. My heart fluttered. His handwriting, my late husband's, on the front. I took the letter to the kitchen table and unfolded it. I read aloud, voice unsteady but clear, how he'd known from the start that Braxton was adopted. The nights he'd held that baby close while I prayed for strength. He wrote that I sacrificed so much, my education, my quiet dreams, so that Braxton would never wonder if he was unwanted. I didn't tell him because I wanted him to feel chosen, not abandoned, the letter ended. My hands moved across the page until the lines blurred. I wept softly. When I looked up, tears had cleansed my vision. Early the next day, I walked to the community center where Braxton volunteered. The hall was busy, children running, bags being sorted. He was there, sleeves rolled up, back bent over a crate. When he saw me, he stiffened. He tried to turn away. I stepped forward, set the letter gently in his hands, and watched him read. His eyes filled. His shoulders sagged. Silence held us. No tears, just truth between us. That night, he came to my door. He stood in the porch light, unsure, embarrassed even. I opened it. He said nothing. I told him, "The truth don't need your apology. It needed your ears." We sat by the window, watching neighborhood children chase a ball across lawns. I spoke of his birthdays, scraped knees, choir recitals. He asked me to tell more. I reached for his hand and began, "Well, the first time I held you." His eyes softened. He listened. A few nights later, Pastor Raymond visited. He came in quietly, Bible in hand. "We'd like you to open service next Sunday," he said. I paused, then nodded. "Let me start where they buried me, on the pulpit." Sunday came. The sanctuary was full. I stood at the podium, Braxton's childhood photo inside my Bible. I looked out at faces, some kind, some skeptical, and I offered a quiet smile. The organ echoed. This was full circle. Later, when I locked up and turned to go home, the knock came. A voice I hadn't heard in 40 years called my name.